Yeah, we can kind of get the camera going because have like maybe a nice homie like Joe Rogan looking podcast. Almost looks like we're ripping off Josh's style.
Well, we should definitely do that. He's done quite well, so totally rip it off. That's what I say.
All right, fair enough. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night. I have to look at the camera now. Welcome to Karate Without Belts and this special long overdue version of the podcast. I'm on location at Asato Dojo with James, I don't know what is a good title for you.
Owner of the dojo.
Owner of the dojo, founder of the 100 Kata Day, twice over. Creator of the Dojo Bar, the once and future place of International Karate Dome.
Let's hope so.
Founder of Bujin TV, breaker of chains, king of the Andals in the first match. Think what else we can give you.
Coffee fan and wannabe martial artist.
I wouldn't say wannabe. I think you're the wannabe who got to be. This is one of those movies about a rock star. This is kind of a watershed moment because first we got to train with our friend Josh.
That was a lot of fun.
And that wasn't, we got most of it kind of on video.
Yeah, it was fun. Yeah, it was good.
James just kind of kidnapped me from my hotel. It was like, we're going to hang out 11, we're going to have dinner, or we're going to have lunch, we're going to train, and not necessarily in that order. And so...
Got to make the most of the day.
And yeah, so I'm down in Okinawa after 2 years of just not being able to make it down here and talking to James. One thing I want to ask James, how the hell are you doing?
I'm good. As always, feeling lucky to be here in Okinawa. And obviously one of the great things about our shared passion, for karate and martial arts is that it connects us to a lot of people. And we get to speak to a lot of people very regularly, right, all around the world. And that's both blessing, but also it, reminds us that lots of people are facing challenges everywhere. And honestly, I do think we're very fortunate to be here in Okinawa. Everybody faces, their own local and daily challenges, but, we have Corona here like everywhere, but, I think we're doing okay compared to a lot of places. The sun's shining.
Right. And if anybody's worried, 100%, he's half. So we're 75% vaccinated.
Mostly vaccinated.
Yeah. So, no worries. We've been very socially distanced most of the day, so no worries there. Recently, what have you been up to with training?
Well, we've been trying to keep our training going regularly at the dojo. Obviously, like everywhere else probably, we've had a decline in numbers of people who are comfortable to come into the dojo and train. We've had some periods of time, short periods, fortunately, over the past 2 years, when we've had to stop training the dojo and go online. But we've been mostly able to continue a regular training pattern here in the dojo and contact with our students, so that's been very good. Of course, the upside of the fact that a lot of people have gone online for a lot of things is that actually, I would say, in some ways, we've been forced to go online more, and we've learned to exploit that more, right, and to make the most of it. And so, when I think about it, and actually when we look at the evidence, the amount of online times we get online and train with people and share knowledge, in some ways, it's been a very productive past 18 months to 2 years. I think that's going to continue, right? Wherever we end up going, and you're going up to the mainland now.
Well, that's the rumor.
Yeah.
You're right.
But we're still going to be very much connected, right? And that's actually one of the things that's changed, I think, for the positive, is that even people like myself who, honestly, I'm not the kind of person who wakes up and thinks, who can I talk to today? I'm a bit of a loner. I sort of prefer to have my time to myself, if I'm honest. However, I know now that there's always going to be a benefit or something I'm going to take out of getting online with people. And so I'm a lot less reticent to do that than I would have been before. Honestly, 2 years ago, if somebody said, hey, let's get online and train together, I would have been a lot more reticent about it. And I'm a lot more open to it now. So,
well, that's interesting because let's go back a minute. Because you just said you're much more of a loner. But since I've known you, and since I think a lot of people who have known you, it's almost the exact opposite.
Yeah.
Because you're trained karate for a long, long time. Probably most of your adult life.
Yeah.
A little bit from your childhood. And that's a tech a lot of people who do martial arts have. It's very much the singularity. You're always part of a community, but it's also something that's also very personal. But it's interesting to hear that you describe yourself as a loner, yet everything you've done for karate has been a way to contribute and build up community.
Given a choice of spending my time alone or going out and finding somebody to spend time with, I will tend to spend my time alone. I like my own time. Right? And I probably always will. However, interactions with other people are what make you really learn and grow. There's a certain amount that you can do by yourself. You can self-educate, you can do things like this. But it's interactions with other people. Sometimes, even if those interactions are a little bit difficult and uncomfortable, that actually make you grow. And I'm not saying that every interaction for me, every interaction with people is difficult. No, it's not. It's a great pleasure. But I am the kind of person who sort of left on my own devices and being a bit lazy, I would tend to be more like, hey, I just want to spend time with myself.
Right.
Having said that, as you say, particularly since I've come to Okinawa, I have realized the benefit of kind of establishing places where people can meet and interact with each other. The Dojo Bar was all about that. My dojo is also about that. My dojo from the start was about, hey, let's have an open dojo that people can come into freely and we can interact and train together and learn from each other. So I know that that's enormously valuable. I suppose I almost have to engineer situations where that's inevitably going to happen.
Right.
And then if I engineer that situation, then I know I'll benefit from it and we'll benefit from it.
So it's kind of you're doing this for your benefit, but at the same time, that benefit makes you social. And because it's ipso facto, you have to be social in order to gain those benefits. And then you're mixing it together, so you are fulfilling those desires, but at the same time, you're still kind of left in that loner situation. Which I feel there's a lot of people who are like that. Like if you talk to a lot of people,
I think my character is such that okay, so here's the thing. I don't feel the need to show everybody what I'm doing, demonstrate to everybody what I'm doing,
right?
Kind of receive approval for things.
You've never seen you do much of that. You've always seemed to spotlight different things.
Yeah.
But you've never been like, this is the kata that I do. This is the training that we do. Right? I've never seen...
I don't go out of my way to seek approval. So I suppose in that way, what I'm learning and training is not to be measured by what other people think of it.
Right.
Although now and again, of course, we end up in that situation, if we end up in a testing situation or a demonstration or whatever. Or indeed in a teaching situation. Right? That's also, of course, a test of yourself as much as anybody else. Training and interaction with other people is definitely beneficial. And I think when you start training, whether you're, particularly as a young person, when you start training, you're not really thinking about the benefit of training for other people. You're thinking about the benefit for yourself.
Right.
And that's fine. That's your primary motivation. But over time, you realize that actually there are benefits to the other people around you, and also that because they're pursuing the same thing, you benefit from that, right? And that's where you start to learn empathy, right? You start to learn that there's a value in understanding how other people feel and think as well. If you don't have any human interaction, you will never develop that.
Right.
And that's an incredibly, actually, important quality.
Especially now with, like, people are... We don't realize it right now because we're all like, the thing. But that's a sincerely... Because we're getting so singular in what we do as a society. Zoom training, social distancing, all this other nonsense. Not nonsense, but all this other stuff.
Yeah.
Right? It is more difficult to get people to understand that you are a part of that community. That you are a part of whether or not it's digitally or not. But what's interesting is that understanding the need to bring that community either together or be a part of that, but not doing it necessarily because you are the guy. I think there's been a lot of situations, especially with karate, especially with people who are outside of Okinawan culture to a degree or Japanese culture, who think just because I am a guy who does karate, ergo I will be successful at opening a dojo, for example.
Right. Yeah.
That didn't seem to be your tack when you went into like the bar. You seemed to just be like, I want to open this bar because I don't want to just go to Sharado and buy a gi. Which I was like, and I remember you describing that about your first trip down here, and it was like, I found one guy and I trained with him and I bought a couple gis and went back home.
Well, yeah, exactly. That was what the Dojo Bar idea was born out of, was the idea that you travel all this way to Okinawa. When you get here, you search around. If you went to Sharado, that's probably the place where you might have had a few chance encounters that, where you met some local people, some local teachers. Maybe you connected to a teacher here. But it always felt like there was a gap. It always felt like, hey, what if there was a place where if you went there, you knew that other people were like-minded, kind would be there. And so that was what the Dojo Bar was about, right? And I'd heard that there had been places in the past run and owned by karate people in Okinawa. And if you knew that was the place where you went after training, because that's where everybody else was going for a beer and a pizza or whatever. So it just seemed like a really good idea. And to me, it was just like, look, if that place existed, I would be there right now.
Right.
But it doesn't exist, so let's create it, let's make it.
And what motivated the move? I know you've got family ties down here, but was that what motivated the move down? Because I know you've been all over Japan. But was that what motivated it? Was that where you're like, we're going to go down to Okinawa and I'm going to open a bar and call it the Dojo Bar?
No, when we moved here, the Dojo Bar, as an idea, hadn't even really been born. I mean, we moved to Okinawa because it was for lifestyle, it was for quality of life, kids' education. It was because I knew that there was good, karate training to be had here, but primarily it was about family. Also, my wife's family business kind of needed the next generation to come along and pick up the reins. And when we landed here, and for the first year or so, I was working with my wife in the family business. Nothing to do with martial arts, nothing to do with karate. Over time, as I was here, the things that I remembered from my visits here and the things that I was experiencing started to coalesce. Well, along with, the fact that I'd worked in bars and clubs to pay my way through university. So I had a bit of experience of those kind of businesses. I knew they were pretty straightforward. And, and that gave me the confidence to decide to sort of strike out on my own and open that kind of business here.
Doing that, did you feel that there wasn't going to be any big pushback? Did you feel that there was going to be a more of a harder climb? Did you feel like locals would be offended by it, or like kind of point out the elephant in the room is that it's a foreigner opening a bar in Okinawa based on one of its most important cultural assets?
Yeah, a foreigner open a bar in Okinawa is not that unusual, right?
Right.
But a bar called the Dojo Bar, a bar specifically about karate, that was another step. That's another leap. And what I heard when I sort of bounced the idea off of my Okinawan karate teacher and a few other Okinawans that I knew was getting to know well, initially they were a bit like, tricky combination. But then it sort of became, well, look, if you were Okinawan, you wouldn't get away with it, but as a foreigner, that might work. So it was a bit sort of like, well, as a foreigner, maybe you can do something here that a local couldn't do because of the sort of the blowback.
But that's interesting because, you walk out to Kokusaidori and then you have, like, Mensore, Itarasha, and, people doing the sanshin and the drums and the taiko, and things that would be considered touristy.
Yeah.
Right? And that's using the culture to a degree for that. And that's not negative or positive, that's just what that is. That's interesting to say that they couldn't do that with karate.
Well,
or that doesn't happen.
In Okinawa, as you well know, you don't just sort of breeze into a dojo, train, and leave again.
Right.
You have to make a commitment to a dojo in order usually to receive instruction. So it's not just like a walk-in, sort of learn and then leave, right? You have to become a member of the dojo and therefore sort of subject yourself to the leadership of your sensei, and therefore the approval of your sensei. If you want to open your own dojo, you need the approval of your sensei to even consider doing it. And if you want to do something commercially related to karate, you definitely need to have the approval of your teacher. Now, and the culture therefore here is more of, I suppose people are a bit reticent to to do something different or innovative, because if they have this idea and they ask for permission and they get denied, that puts them in a very difficult position. Right? Particularly if it's something that they feel they really want to do, but their teacher has said, no, don't do that. Then they're in a difficult place, right? So I actually think one of the reasons why more Okinawans don't train in martial arts here in Okinawa is because of the burden of membership of a dojo. Yeah. I've spoken to a few Okinawans who were like, I'm really interested in karate, I'd like to give it a try, but I'm worried about if I don't like it, how difficult it would be for me to then quit from the dojo. And because they don't want to deal with the trauma, the difficulty of leaving a dojo,
the social fabric.
Yeah, they don't join in the first place. So that kind of gives you an indication of like maybe the overhead, the obligation that Okinawans feel about getting involved in martial arts in Okinawa.
Which is not something a lot of people who, either from where I'm from or where you're from, necessarily feel. It's just part of a club or part of what you do, as opposed to social.
Perhaps in other places, joining a dojo is more just like more of a financial transaction.
Yeah.
I pay my membership, I receive instruction. When I stop paying my membership, I stop receiving instruction. Well, in Okinawa, as you know, many dojos don't really have a commercial basis. If there's fees, they're often just nominal. They're a nod towards. There's just an affirmation of membership. So there's a different emphasis there. Often, the dojo itself is inside the teacher's house. So every time you go to the dojo, it's like he's receiving you personally into his space.
Literally.
So again, that creates an enormous amount of obligation, because every time he does that, it's an act of hospitality and generosity on his part, and it builds up obligation. So for these reasons, I think maybe that a local will be less adventurous about exploring slightly different angles and aspects of karate culture within Okinawa. As a foreigner, you get more license.
Which is what it is. Like, I want to say that's unfortunate. Some people would be like, that's disrespectful. And some people, well, that's awesome. But,
it's sort of the 8 out of 10 cats rule. When they're putting cat food on the market. If 8 out of 10 cats like it, it's a successful cat food, right? I don't know if that's from America or the UK, but...
this is the first time I'm hearing this rule. I mean, cats are pretty picky. But
yeah, exactly. So
I'm more of a dog person.
So, when I opened the Dojo Bar, of course, a lot of people were a little bit like, wow, what's this kind of place? A bit cautious about it. But once people had been there and enjoyed it and experienced it, I would say 8 out of 10, 9 out of 10 people thought it was great. And we're talking mainly about local people to start with, because when I opened, there were far fewer visitors coming to Okinawa, and it took a while for people to find the place anyway, right? So initially, probably the first year or two, it was visitors and locals discovering the place equally, and most that came thought it was a good idea. So.
Do you feel it helped create kind of a landing ground for a lot more people coming in for karate?
Yeah, absolutely. And that was very much sort of from the start, one of the important functions of it for me. It was Meidatsu in Japanese. It stood out. It was easy to find. It was a bit of a landmark.
On a pretty convenient corner.
Yeah, exactly. So location-wise, I chose that specifically, that it was in a place where karate people who were heading to Shureido, etc., were likely to find it. I named it so that it would be easy to find, easy to remember. Although I had quite a lot of locals calling it the Judo Bar for a while. But hey, they were remembering something, so that was fine. But that was the point. Is that it stood out, it was easy to find, and so people would get there. And then, for me, the thing I realized with Dojo Bar is, if people come in and actually have an experience that exceeds what they expected, then they're really happy, and then they'll tell their friends about it, and it will grow. So they come into the Dojo Bar, and they and myself or my staff there, we're able to give them information, local information. About teachers, events, places to go and see, where to go and buy the best value shisa, where to get this, where to get that, all that kind of stuff. And it's all more than they expected. And that's the value of the Dojo Bar. So, it's a network effect, right? The more people go, the more information and more friendship, etc., is there to be shared. So.
Now, there's one thing I want to ask. I never asked you this when you had the Dojo Bar. Did you intend to have a non-stop late 90s, early 2000s soundtrack playing in there most of the time? Or was it only that the case when I was there.
Because
for whatever reason, I just remember it was like, this is late 90s, early 2000s music, like, just all the time. I'm like, was that just the one CD you had?
Could have been. It might have been the case that of us settling on a playlist we were comfortable with, and then being a bit too lazy with it.
And then, like, that naturally progressed from there to here, where we're sitting right now, literally across the street.
Yeah.
And honestly, what I would say is like your standard for like a place for training. I mean, you got the mats, you got everything. It's a little back office type area. Yeah. Just chill out. Got a clock right now. But what sparked the idea for, because it's one thing to open a bar, but it's another thing to open a running school. And was that always the intention there, or was that what made that go to that?
I think opening a dojo is, or it should be, a very personal decision. I think obviously some people open dojos as businesses, a commercial business, and this dojo, has to make a bit of money. We have to pay rent, so we have to sort of have an underpinning for it. I think opening a dojo should be something that you do when you feel you're ready for it, when you feel like it's the right thing to do, and that was very much the case here. So obviously with the Dojo Bar running and lots of people coming to visit and lots of people therefore presenting sort of cross-training opportunities to share information, share training with different people, and we go to the Budokan and do that, or we go to the Kaikan and do that, or go to different dojos and do that. Of course, my consistent main training style is Shorin Karate, which I like, and I think that will always be a very significant part of my training and what I do and the sort of style that I do things. But also, as you train, you realize the value of cross-training. I do think if you insist on keeping a very narrow view in your martial arts training, that actually it dwindles. So over time, you learn less and less and less, because there's less and less to learn within any style, right?
Right, and like that's the ultimate burnout. Yeah. Right? That's the ultimate. Everyone's like, well, I learned all the katas. Yeah. Or I learned all that and this and that, right? I don't have to do any of that.
Exactly. So I think you should naturally accept that you need to have a fresh injection of insight or a fresh injection of energy or comparative perspective on what you're doing, right? So cross-training is, at a certain point, cross-training becomes a very necessary part of what you do in order to keep progressing. And so that's really what, for me, my dojo space was about. Because if you're using somebody else's dojo space or a public dojo space, you can only go so far in crafting what happens there.
Right.
Yeah. My dojo here is the environment I craft to try and encourage the kind of level of cross-training and training that I think is the right thing to do.
And that's tough because it's like a lot of people will be purists, or a lot of people will say, well, we already have enough, or they don't want to have other people influence their other students, da-da-da-da-da. But what's interesting here, and maybe you can clear the books for us a little on this, because a lot of people will say, well, in Okinawa, XYZ, been there, or they don't have the language, or they've only been there for a visit one time, and so people don't cross-train or whatever. Especially as someone who is both non-native Okinawan, but also is teaching karate to Okinawans and cross-training and being representative of 5 different things at once. Do you feel you get flack for that? Do you feel that the community here has been ambivalent, supportive?
Well, first of all, I think I think it would be very, very easy and entirely justified for people that take a position here that you should just commit yourself to one style and be loyal to that style, to look at what we do here, what I do, and say, that based on those standards, say, you're jumping around too much or you're not being loyal. So of course that's going to happen. I know that happens. It's a difference in. Conversely, I would look the other way and say, your returns from your training are dwindling and dwindling. For me, I want to craft a path that is a path of progress. And also, and to a certain extent, also trying to validate what I'm being taught or what I think I'm learning. Right? You don't really get to really validate things if you only just operate within a very small environment all the time.
Right, and then that becomes weirdly incestuous to a degree because if you don't, I found this especially when you're told this is the only thing you need to do
Yeah.
because it's got everything.
Yeah.
We have everything. We don't need anything else.
Yeah.
And then it's kind of like saying, well, you don't need to. You're just locked into this one thing. You're just locked into this one way of doing things for the rest of your life.
We need to remember that this idea that you should be loyal to a ryuha, right, is a relatively modern concept.
Yeah.
Here too.
Yeah.
So first off, there were no ryuha here. The idea of ryuha sort of somehow came into it really came into practice when Okinawan martial arts encountered Japanese martial arts. So around the time that Funakoshi and Kano sort of met and started that transfer of customs and culture between the judo culture and the karate culture. And we recognize that, right? We know that dogis and belts and the kyu-dan system and so many other things are transference from traditional Japanese culture into Okinawan karate culture. Right. And there's no dispute about that. It's historical record. So we also know that many of the teachers that we now revere as founders of our modern traditional arts cross-trained. They went and learned from all kinds of different teachers. I trained principally, or mostly in Matsubashi Shorin-ryu, and the founder of that, Nagamine Shoshin, documented at least 4 or 5 major teachers. But if you actually read through his history, there were probably twice as many as that.
What's interesting is his history. I think, I don't know if I'm right or wrong on this, I think this is like the first time. How specific was he in getting that book translated into English?
How specific?
Because I feel like that was the only place I've seen Mototobu and Araki and some of those other guys.
Yeah.
Those stories specifically talked about. Like I was in a dojo for 5 years when I was a kid.
Right.
Saw Motobu on the wall.
Yeah.
Had no idea who he was, what the story was, and until I bought the book and read it. I'm like, you did that? There's this story with the boxer?
Yeah.
Holy moly! But so I'm like, I feel like that book is invaluable to understanding that Okinawan karate was just built on cross training to begin with.
Absolutely.
And what their form of cross training was is what they had around.
And I think Nagamine, like Funakoshi, probably found himself in a sort of paradoxical position, right? Because in writing the book, he was in fact consolidating and in fact creating a limited identity for what he did.
Right.
It's like, this is the book of Matsubashi Karate. In other words, if it's in the book, it's canon. If it didn't make it into the book, it's not canon. It's a very easy definition to make, right? But it's a book, it's a snapshot point in time.
Right.
Yeah. And is it likely that Nagamine Shoshin Sensei, who spent his entire life basically training martial arts, was a policeman, then was a community leader, at the end became somewhat of he very much in his elderly life was all about Zen and the value of Zen meditation. Do you think that he got all of that into a book? Well, no, of course not.
That book is, it's mostly instructional on the...
It lays out a framework.
Yeah.
Yeah? And it tries to say, okay, I want to show you the way that I do this. We do this in our dojo now. But even within that book alone, there are gaps from, say, the standard kind of training canon that Matsubashi dojos do today. So, for example, the warm-up sequences and that sort of thing, it's not really covered in that book so much. Yeah, there is nothing in there much about bunkai.
I feel the proliferation of the styles outside of Okinawa created more of a crystallization effect and kind of a weird gestalt of this is this thing, but it's not the thing, but it's not going to look like the thing, but it tries to look like the thing. And then it's always people trying to look like the authentic thing, but they're always not getting there. And then so they're stuck in this constant loophole or this constant loop of I need to find the original thing. I need to go to Okinawa to find the original thing. Well, I can't find it here. Well, where is it? And da-da-da.
Well, it's a case of many people either being told explicitly or resorting to, authority by association. I am associated with this teacher who is the source of this, therefore I'm claiming authority on this point, or on this area, right? And that happens just as much here in Okinawa as it does elsewhere. In martial arts, I think we face a constant challenge and choice, which is to try and either resort to authority by association, association with somebody else's reputation, or to try and achieve authority through proof, through testing, through actually, stress testing what we do and what we know. And we all, to some extent, have a mix of both in what we do, because it's extremely testing and tasking to be able to verify everything that we do ourselves. We look to tradition because we don't want to have to recreate the wheel all the time, right? So we have to make some assumptions about, okay, this has been proven.
Right.
So let's accept that and then build on top. Yeah? But if in everything we do, we just go, that's correct because somebody says so, and we never verify anything, then it's a house of cards, right?
Right.
Yeah. So that's the struggle that we face as sort of traditional martial artists, right?
And I feel like that term, traditional martial artists, gets shoehorned into you only do this, rather than you're taking this and then continuing the tradition in that the tradition is maintaining it but constantly changing.
Yeah.
Which is a difficult thing for people to get their head around. It's weird to think that people have a difficult time getting their head around this, because as we were kind of talking earlier today, we were talking about like punching and stuff like that, and just how people have always said, well, that's just boxing, or that's just that. I'm like, what's wrong with boxing? You want to fight a boxer?
Humans hit each other in pretty much the same way wherever you go. Like the way that two stand-up primates physically fight doesn't change so much wherever you go, right? So
we got to find a way of fighting centaurs. That's the next problem. Man has 4 legs.
I saw this great video the other day of 2 young gorillas kind of just wrestling and sparring, and one of them goes down, goes for a heel hook, misses that, goes to the other heel hook, pushes the other one to the floor. Like, those guys never went to a dojo, never got karate training. They're just fighting naturally, and it's a natural expression. They're not fighting. They're just playing. They're play fighting, right? Exactly what we do, right? And well, that's one of the tests, right? Can we make it work naturally? Yeah. This is one of the problems with building what we do based on too many assumptions of authority because of reputation. We need to get down and test things now and again. Yeah? Does it feel natural? Can I pull it off? Can I make it work against any level of resistance? Yeah? Can I make it work? Actually, theoretically, I can imagine it. Okay, in a kata mode, I can perform it. Okay, in a 2-man kata, I can perform it very slowly. All right, now can I make it work at any increased level of speed and resistance? And that should be a large part of our training. Now, the challenge is, if I've got 20 odd kata that are part of my canon, then doing that process with 20 odd kata is just... I mean, if I don't do this full time, all the time, I've got lots of people around me doing the same thing, it just isn't possible. So what we have now, because of the need to preserve things, this focus on we talked about the Hozonkai, the preservation societies.
Which aren't bad things.
Yeah, they're not bad things. I'm not a fan of preservation societies because although the intention is good, i.e. don't lose the learning from the past, the focus becomes on don't lose anything. And so they keep everything because they have no way of saying, okay, this is the stuff that's not so good, we should lose this and just focus on the stuff that's worth keeping. They don't do that filter.
Right.
So they keep everything. And of course, that tends to stagnate over time.
It's kind of like karate hoarding to a degree. And because it's like, you don't have, it's not like art, you know what I mean? Where it's like, you can't just put it on the wall. Mm. You have to it has to be in people's bones.
Yeah.
And it has to be work in their bones. And so you have to have, I'm not opposed to, I've seen this kind of work where it's like, you have an organization, you have 5 people, and all right, you're the bow guy, you're the sai guy, you're the kama guy.
Yeah.
2 of those people get mad and leave and go somewhere else. You're the Bo and Kama guy. You're the guy. That one guy leaves. 2 other people come in.
Yeah.
Those 2 people who are left are kind of mad because those 2 people are new or whatever.
Yeah.
And so I can firmly agree with that. It just becomes like, all right, then what do we save? What do we leave?
Yeah.
What do we just put on record and hold on to? Because I think, like, you can hold on to a lot of stuff, but that's not necessarily a thing to focus on and make what you do every time. You have to have that focus to be able to get there, but also keep it broad. So
The truth is, if we look at significant figures, if we just even look at significant figures in Okinawa Karate history,
right.
which is a narrow field based on the world of martial arts, right? It's one of hundreds, possibly thousands of timelines of history, right? But it's the one that we know best, right? So let's take that one. Okay, think about the people who've made a significant contribution and become a significant part of those lineages in history. They're almost always there, not because they just preserved things in glass, but because they took it and added an interpretation to it and created a new school.
Funakoshi literally renaming all of the katas to make them sound more Japanese.
Uechi Sensei created Uechi-ryu.
Right.
It was something different before. Nagamine Shoshin created Matsubashi-ryu. It was a number of different things before. Shimabukuro Sensei created Ishin-ryu.
Right.
It was a number of things before.
Goes on.
Miyagi Sensei created Goju-ryu. Right? It was a number of different things before.
Now it's Cobra Kai.
Right. So what's the function? What's the objective of each generation? Surely it is to become an effective filter. To take what we learn from history, and to filter and enhance it, to refine it, right? Onko Chishin, we use this phrase a lot, right? Onko Chishin. If you look at the characters, so on means to boil up or to cook up or to heat up things, right? Literally, like to refine things to produce something new. Think of it as still, a whiskey still, right?
Mm-hmm.
You put in a bunch of stuff, you boil it up, and you get even better stuff come out the top. Yeah.
So do you think now we're kind of at the point where everything's in the pot, but the heat's not on?
No, I think the process is ongoing. It's happening all the time.
Yeah.
We can always find the stagnant pool, the stuff that's not going anywhere, right? But increasingly, it's easier to find the stuff that is happening because it bubbles up through the information network, and people go, "Did you see that? That's really cool."
Which leads us to...
Did you see that?
Yeah.
Did you see that? And that's why connection comes circle back. Right?
Yeah.
If you're only by yourself, you learn something, but you're not really going to go anywhere, in my opinion. Even if you like being by yourself, you have to recognize that this process of this bubbling up and filtering of either an interpretation which helps you to understand something better, or a synthesis which actually progresses something. Every generation's kata...
Making sure it's okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Every generation's kata. Every generation creates kata. Let's take kata as one of the outputs. Interpretation which helps you to understand something better, or a synthesis which actually progresses something. Every generation's kata.
Making sure it's okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Every generation's kata. Every generation creates kata. Let's take kata as one of the outputs. It's by no means the only output, but it's one that we're familiar with, right? I mean, every generation's kata is a synthesis of things that have come before, but hopefully, in some way, slightly better than what came before. Sometimes significantly better. And you should be able to look at it and just go, that's better.
The karate police are coming after you right now. They can hear it. Most of this, as I was talking with Sal the other day, is just propaganda towards a new generation. We're leading a revolution here, so there's going to be pushback.
Even if you don't feel like the innovator yourself, right?
Yeah.
I mean, if you can be inspired by people who are, then everybody sort of is uplifted together, right?
Right. Like even if you're not the one who, if you're even participating, which there's some problems with that I feel now because of social media, and there's some parasocial issues with that, but. Even participating in what's being put out now, if you participate, then you're contributing to a degree, right? You might not be creating, but if you're creating a drill, you're creating a kata, and other people are learning from you. And even in our like distanced world now, where people are picking things up digitally, or like this whole idea of like learning kata through video and whatnot, which I talked with our friend Christian about a little. You can create something and have no contact with somebody else who's picking it up, and then that's changing. That's almost like a permeation in itself.
Well, that's been happening since cavemen scratched pictures on walls.
Yeah.
You know, like if you don't think that a caveman scratching a picture of him holding a spear and killing a buffalo with it didn't have somebody else go, "You can kill buffalo with spears." Yeah. It's been happening forever. You know? Scrolls, books. Now we have video.
Yeah.
You know, soon it'll be holographic. Soon it'll be literally we'll be injecting it into our thoughts.
This man believes that we will be psychically speaking to each other in 10 years.
Well, why wouldn't we?
Right.
Let's say you're a really inspiring, amazing martial artist. 10 years from now.
Hopefully.
Believe it. But let's say you are, right? And I travel all the way around the world. I'm like, I really want to learn from you. Well, actually, in the digital world, I don't need to go anywhere. But let's put that to the side. Right. I really want to learn from you. And what's the best way to do that? Well, you go, well, I've got it all sorted out in my head. I've got the patterns. I've learned the way that I want to do this. Let me just give that to you. Right? Am I going to go, no. What I'd like to do is spend 10 years watching you. And you use words to try to explain to me what you think what the concept. I mean, which one are you going to choose?
If you're able to do so, then you're just going to basically be able to give that map.
Because the objective is to try to share and educate. Right?
And what's interesting there is that, like, because we're kind of future cast, future karate cast, where it's like those kinds of connections. What is I think the vocal fear of what today is that we are losing that connection through social media, through everything. But it's weird to think a year after we started with like the Bujin project, right? How like we're connected with that now. We're connected with a bunch of other people around the world.
Yeah,
we wouldn't have, a year ago. We wouldn't have talked to. We wouldn't have known. We would have just been like, "Who's that jerk on Instagram?"
Right.
He's one of my good friends who like we're always like streaming every Friday if possible.
I think a reaction to an overwhelming increase in information is to try to push everything back. Right. You know, rather the difficult thing is to filter. There's so much information, and often the information that you notice is the stuff that's more sensational. Right. And often it's engineered to be that way. Because that sells advertising, etc., etc., etc. But the thing is that actually, we have an ever-increasing, improving mechanism for validating what's good and useful and what's not, which is our network. Right. So if you have a community around something, then the net benefit of the community is that it acts like a review system, acts like a filter. Right, and often you can't always necessarily just trust it, but you have to have an input into it. But very often the community will work together to go, what do we think about this? What do we think of this thing? Are you going to copy this? Are you going to do this? Yeah, I like this. I'm going to do this. Or that's just no good.
And it's good kind of community through consensus in that degree.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because then you have, and what's interesting is the old stereotypes where like I hate to even say this, but it's like people would be like Japanese Okinawan karate. People would be like Japanese karate, meh. But then it's like we were copying today in our training are also those people. And I don't think you're so much of this, but people who I've worked with, like those people. Don't worry about it. But just how they themselves, and through kind of the topic of this conversation, have evolved and changed and created something new from those percolation points.
Yeah.
So we all owe you a great debt to creating those communities, from the Dojo Bar to here to Bujin, to creating those communities. And then also the 100 Kata days. Just got to shout that out there too.
Sure.
Because so many people who have no idea who you are. We're like, we're going to do this. Yeah, kata 100 times. I'm just waiting for you to be like, all right, 100 kumite. Yeah, we're going to do the 100 kumite day.
I like the idea.
Me too. This is a matter of you can't do that by yourself.
100 bunka.
That could work out too. That could work out a little harder, but people could get creative. What I'm thinking is we do. I don't know if you've ever had the Labor Day marathon. You know what that is?
No.
So in America, we had it's like all day on Labor Day, where it's like you have like rows of celebrities that are on like the phones and picking up the phones.
Oh, it's like a charity thing.
Kind of, yeah.
Right.
So I'm in live pitching this idea to you. But cool, man, cool. James, thank you so much for doing this. One question: what's your training going to be like for the rest of this week?
So it's a combination of teaching in the evenings. I honestly need to get back and do a little bit more weight training. I haven't been doing so much of that recently.
Today there will be video later of three men mid-30s up hitting a tire with hands.
Yeah, I mean, movement, Hojo-Indo, traditional Hojo-Indo, and as much as possible, hands-on training.
Right.
I mean, right now, I like to build a lot from kakie. So those are the kind of the fun elements. But I also, I don't do so much kata practice in my training, and sometimes I think I need to do a little more just to sort of retain the patterns. So I kind of have a love-hate's a bit strong, but a sort of an on and off kind of love affair with kata.
Good way to put it. But you're not the only one, I feel, because I think there's plenty of people out there who are like, I know all the kata, all the 180 kata that whatever Ryu has, and then they'll be that way for like a year or two, and then after it's like, 5 of those kata I actually know. Yeah. So I 100% get that feeling. Yeah.
All right. But I want to thank you for taking the time to come here, and it's been just a really fun chat.
You kidnapped me. Okay. No, I'm going to say this at the end here is James went out of his way to make sure that I got to the dojo, I got to train, we got to hang out with Josh, we got to do this, and we're going out to dinner, and James, you could not be more the embodiment of hospitality and the embodiment of what it means for karate to go out into the world. So I want to say thank you.
It's my pleasure.
And to everybody else, thank you for listening, and don't forget to keep training.